This video is an ad for Genshin Impact. Tjena, Martina here, and today we're gonna make a book from scratch. Now, this book is gonna be the biggest, thickest, most intricate book we have ever made. And we gotta combine bookbinding with leatherworking, metalworking, and epoxy casting to make that happen. This is the book we're gonna create. It's a catalyst weapon called Wine and Song from the game Genshin Impact, and it's just an incredible looking book. And you can check out the game with our link down below, by the way, but more on that later. And now, as with all books, we gotta start with folding a lot of paper, sew it together, add some detail, and we're gonna be left with this giant text block. Let's get down to business. This is without a doubt the thickest, chunkiest text block I have ever made. Like, it's 600 pages of fairly thick paper. That was the easy part, because now we're gonna start working on the covers. We have many challenges to face with these covers. I mean, just look at them. I think we're just gonna start with the most essential core element, which is the lights. The problem with these lights is that they're so spread out over both the front and the back covers. And like, how the freak am I supposed to stuff several light sources in here in this tiny space without making them visible? I think I'll have to make the cover boards out of acrylic, because then I can put some kind of light source along the edge so that will light up the acrylic. And so when I put leather on top, I can cut out some holes and the light will just shine through all of those holes. I spent a little time getting the covers ready for laser cutting. So as you can see here, the blue parts is where we want to make the cutouts and let the light shine through. And all of these snaky parts is where we're gonna put our light sources to avoid all of those holes. So this way I should be able to hide all my light sources properly. So now let's just cut these out. These holes right here are just big enough for these 3-volt battery holders. And these are going to power our light source, which is some blue LED filament. And these are just perfect for this project because they require a low voltage, they're super flexible, and they're also really bright. They're just, they're perfect. But I don't want to go ahead and start soldering and attaching the LEDs to the covers just yet, because they're still a little floppy, so I think it's best if I cut the leather, attach these to the leather, and then work with it as like one unit. Let's go. we've carved the covers and attached them to the leather, so now we are ready for soldering. And also, I made sure to paint all the places where we're gonna have the lights in white, just to make sure that it won't look weird when we glue on the text block. And also, the white is gonna help reflect the light so it becomes as bright as possible. But yeah, so now we can just find our battery holders, our LED filament, and we can try to start working our way through these little snaky paths. Let's begin with the battery holders. I'm just gonna glue these in place first of all, just to make it a bit easier, like so. So these are directional, meaning that the LEDs point in one direction. So I'm just gonna make sure to glue them so that the LED points out towards the spot where I want the light to go. And also I have to find space for all the wires. You know what? Let's just put on a time lapse because this is gonna take a while, I think. Well, that took all of yesterday. But now they finally work. They all light up. It was a little bit of a hassle getting everything to fit in here because all these light strips had to be wired in parallel, as well as the batteries here, so there are a lot of small wires, a lot of small LED filament, but we're done. Now back to the aesthetic stuff. So now I'm just gonna quickly thin down the edges here so I can glue them in place. We're left with some covers ready for painting. I'm gonna start dyeing my leather. I'm gonna use this dye from Leather's Choice in white and blue, and I'm kind of just gonna mix a couple of different blue tones because there are 3 blue tones here and 1 kind of purplish color, and I'm just gonna mix these together to create all the colors I need. Let's get painting! Look at these covers! I did one more little thing at the end that I didn't film. I just added a little bit of black in all the carvings here just to make the design kind of pop a little more. But now the painting is done and we can start working on all the detail that we're kind of gonna put on top here. The first thing is the sphere in the middle here. We're gonna cast that in epoxy. So for that, we gotta go down to the basement. The basement. It's time to start working on those epoxy details on the cover, and the most important one I think is that sphere in the middle. And the way I'm planning to make that is to take some kind of blank, make a vacuum mold, and then cast resin in the mold. Pretty simple, right? But I was looking all over the place for something spherical that I could use as a blank that was the perfect size, and the only thing I could find was this. It's the perfect size, perfect shape, perfect everything, except that it's styrofoam. I'm a little afraid that the vacuum former will deform this because the sheet gets really hot before you can cast it. I'm thinking I'm just gonna try to protect this with a coat of plaster, and then hopefully everything will be fine. So let me just find my plaster. Plaster, water, mixing sticks, mixing cup, brush. So now let's just mix this up. Nice. And now we coat it. And now it just has to dry. It was a little thin, so I ended up just pouring it over instead, and now I just have to even it out. Nice. 1 hour later, and it's now hardened, so now we can make the vacuum mold. Det funka jo dritbra. as I would say in Norwegian. Why? I don't have anything else that's spherical. Well, the plaster was definitely not enough to save it from the heat, because the plaster just cracked and then the styrofoam melted. We'll be back after the break. And now, before we move on, I just want to tell you a little bit about Genshin Impact. Genshin Impact is an open-world action RPG game set in the world of Teyvat. This game is actually incredibly pretty, like the graphics are super nice and the gameplay is a lot of fun too. I think it's really cool that the magic system is based on 7 different elements, so all the characters you collect can control one element, so you really have to strategize while playing the game. They have an engaging storyline with lots of different characters along the way, and a co-op mode so you can team up with friends. Right now they're releasing a brand new version of the game, so there are tons of new challenges and missions to complete. There's a new 5-star Hydro character called Kokomi, new beautiful maps to explore, new bosses, and new features like fishing and farming. Another bonus is that the game is available on both PC, Android, iOS, and PlayStation 4 and 5, and you can just switch between them seamlessly. So if you think this sounds interesting, then make sure to check out the game with the link in the description. I mean, it helps out the channel and it's a cool game. And back to the project. Welcome back! I found a solution to the problem. I went back and I found another one of my styrofoam balls, and then I covered it again with plaster. But what I did differently was I covered it with some epoxy glue to make it hardened, and then instead of using heat, because yeah, I used a 2-component silicone putty that I just squished on top of it, and now we have the perfect casting mold. So we're ready for casting. Let's just add a tiny bit of glitter and a drop or 2 of blue pigment. Maybe 2, okay. Perfect. And now we pour. Perfect. Good morning. It's time to see how this little thing turned out. It's looking promising. Ta-da! I mean, it's not glossy, obviously, because of the silicone, but I think what I can do is just clean this up a bit, and then we can kind of paint on a layer of epoxy glue so that the surface becomes shiny. Ha! Psych! I made another one. I grabbed the other one, I tested it on the cover, and it just looked like kind of a weird lump. It was just a little too tall and a little too small. So I ended up casting a new one, which has a better curve and just, it's more glossy, it's nicer, and look how pretty. I actually ended up using just a sphere mold that we had lying around, so a lot of trouble for nothing. Now that we got our sphere in the proper shape and everything, I am just going to paint that little pattern that is on the cover inside the sphere, and then we can glue this in place and apply some UV resin into the rest of these holes here. Let's do it. The covers are looking pretty good so far, and now it's time to deal with all those gold details that are on the covers, so it's time to do the metalworking. But I'm not gonna use real gold because, oh boy, I ain't got that kind of money. So I'm gonna use this instead. Some brass, which is like the next best thing, I guess. For the most part, I'm gonna be using some sheet metal to cut out all the pieces I need, and then use some oxidizing liquid to make some cool patterns on it. But with these 3 parts, I'm gonna have to do some metal casting. But I'll be working on the sheet metal first. Let's do this. spent literal days just sawing, sanding, and now finally making all the lines here ready for oxidizing. And I'm so happy with how clean these lines turn out, and now I'm just hoping that the oxidizing will go fine. So this is the oxidizing liquid. Please just work. And now this is supposed to make it completely black. Okay, let's do this. Now I'm just gonna wash this off with some water, wipe down, and now let's peel off the tape. Oh my god! I just finished cleaning these up a bit and I think they're looking pretty good. I mean, this is the first time we're trying to oxidize brass, so I haven't really got the technique nailed down yet. There are some imperfections here, like some of the lines didn't come out perfectly, but I think overall they're looking really nice. So now let's just try to attach these to the leather and then we can do the casting. It's finally finished! When we started this project 3 weeks ago, I knew we would have to do everything from leatherworking to electronics and metalworking, and it seemed like such a daunting task before beginning, but here we are, finished! I just want to give a huge thanks to Genshin Impact for letting us work on such a cool project, and remember you can check out the game by using our link down in the description, and also a huge thanks to you for following along on yet another project journey, and of course a huge thanks to our patrons for continuing to support us. And now, it's time. Let's have a look at the final result!